Good afternoon, everybody. I want to welcome you to the latest in our series of ENO Center for Transportation webinars. My name is Robert Fuentes. I'm the president and CEO of ENO. And let me first extend my best wishes to you and yours, and hope everybody is staying safe and healthy. Today, we present a rapid response webinar on the Corona Relief Package and Transportation. I am joined virtually by Jeff Davis, a senior fellow at ENO and the editor of ENO Transportation Weekly. Transportation Weekly has been the go-to source of information analysis excuse me, and perspectives on all things transportation for over 20 years, and no one follows it better than Jeff Davis. Over the course of the next half hour or so, Jeff will explain and analyze the billions of dollars in emergency assistance that is provided to the transportation sector by the massive Corona relief package that's moving through Congress right now. So Jeff will walk us through the legislation, what we know so far. After that, we will take questions. Please use the questions function on the webinar website to submit. You don't have to wait till Jeff is done to submit questions. So with that, take it away, Jeff.
Thank you very much, Rob. Things are still in flux. They, as of right now, this minute, they struck a final agreement in principle just for 1 a.m. this morning, and I was awake watching the floor when McConnell and Schumer announced it at about 1:40 in the morning and adjourned. The bill text is 99% final, but it's still being tweaked here and there. I don't believe that any of the ongoing tweaking relates to the transportation parts of it. They'd hoped to have the bill text publicly circulated several hours ago. There's still a few last minute holdups. The Senate really wants to vote on this thing today and then get out of Dodge until I think April 20th. The House has already met and adjourned today, so they can't vote on it until Thursday at the earliest. They're still trying to figure out if they can get all 430 members to agree to pass it by unanimous consent. No one has to come back to town, but if so much as one person objects to that, they'll have to fly back to DC, so that might take till Friday. And in that case, you'll have to worry about getting the minimum of a quorum physically present, 216, I think, out of the current 430 members. So we'll see how that goes. But as of right now, we think we know most of what's going on in the bill. There's $2 trillion or so in various kinds of federal appropriations and credit assistance from the U.S. Treasury. The Congressional Budget Office is, I think they have technical difficulties on how they work remotely. So CBO still hasn't given us a final score of the last bill that was signed into law 10 days ago, much less this current thing. But from what I can tell, there's $114 billion in this package specifically for transportation. There's $36.1 billion in discretionary appropriations for US DOT. There's another $32 billion in grants for aviation sector businesses that are outside the appropriations process. It just says that the Secretary of Treasury shall make available or shall give the money, which makes it budget authority. And then up to $46 billion in loans and loan guarantees for aviation sector businesses. So going in order here, first of all, the grants to the airlines. The Secretary, quote, shall provide financial assistance that shall exclusively be used for the continuation of payment of employee wages, salaries, and benefits, unquote. This is the House formulation. The original Senate bill from Sunday morning just made a bunch of loans to air carriers. The House did a lot of grants, but made it extremely clear that they were for wage, salary, benefits only. Of that, $25 billion goes for passenger air carriers, $4 billion for cargo carriers, and then $3 billion for contractors that perform catering, ground crew, ticketing, other kind of check-in functions for Part 121 scheduled air carriers. So $32 billion there for grants that air carriers don't have to pay back as long as they can maintain their wages, salaries, and benefits. The money for individual carriers is given out in proportion to the salaries and benefits they paid in the April 1st to September 30th 6-month period of last year. The big carriers have to report that to the DOT anyway. For smaller carriers, I think there's a separate system to figure out what those dollar amounts were. This is going to go out quickly. Treasury is supposed to issue rules within 5 days of the bill being signed into law, which is presumably going to be Friday or Saturday, and then start cutting checks within 10 days of that. Grant recipients must not cut payer benefits or make involuntary furloughs until at least September 30th, 2020. Grant recipients may not buy stock back or pay stock dividends until after September 2021. And USDOT is authorized to force carriers to maintain all the service to destinations they were scheduled to serve as of March 1st, 2020, a little backwards in time, and maintain that through March 1st, 2022. But I believe the secretary does have a little bit of discretion on that, Secretary Chow. Now then, there's a large $500 billion pool of loans and loan guarantees for large businesses, ones that don't meet the small business definition of having 500 or fewer employees. And of those, $46 billion is set aside for the aviation sector specifically. Up to $25 billion in loans and loan guarantees for passenger air carriers, Part 145 repair stations, and ticket agents or brokers as defined in Title 49. And there's up to $4 billion in loans and loan guarantees for cargo air carriers. And then there's that up to $17 billion in loans and loan guarantees for, quote, businesses critical to maintaining national security, unquote, which has always sounded a whole lot like Boeing, possibly General Electric as well, from the engine side. But on the defense contractor aerospace side, it definitely matches up with Boeing. Loans can only be made if there's a large number of restrictions here. The Treasury Secretary who's in charge of this has to determine that regular credit is not reasonably available. That's one of the restrictions they had in the 911 loans as well. The intended obligation has to be prudently incurred, which can mean a lot of things. The interest rate has to reflect both market risk and be comparable to the pre-coronavirus interest rates. The loan duration must be as short as practical and no longer than 5 years. And, quote, the eligible business must have incurred or is expected to incur covered losses directly or indirectly as a result of coronavirus, such that the continued operations of the business are jeopardized as determined by the secretary, unquote. In other words, Mnuchin has to agree that you'll go out of business if you don't get this loan in order to get one of these loans. Now, I'm not sure how that works in combination with the grants. The grants may be enough for some people, some entities to keep it going. Others may have to take advantage of the loan facilities as well. There's a separate set of restrictions that apply to the loans and loan guarantees. There's another prohibition on stock buybacks during the life of the loan unless they were contractually obligated. No more dividend payments. Again, that's similar to the ones for the grants. There's a requirement that the recipients of the loans maintain their employment levels as of yesterday to the extent practicable, unquote. And under no circumstances, practical or not, can they cut employment by more than 10% from that March 24th base employment for the duration of the loan. They have to certify that the recipient's based in the U.S. and has a majority of its employees in the U.S. And then there's the restrictions on compensation of executives making over $425,000 a year. That's another thing that was in the 9/11 bailouts as well. It was $300,000 comp then, now it's $425,000. So they can't get raises through 1 year after the end of the loan based on their 2019 salary levels and compensation. And I believe there's also some golden parachute restrictions. Now, some of that applies to all $500 billion of loans, but there's some other restrictions on the aviation sector loans in loan guarantees in particular that says that the loans and loan guarantees can only be made, quote, if the secretary receives a warrant or equity interest in the eligible business, unquote. And that's for businesses that are traded on a stock exchange. If a business is privately held, they got to get some other kind of warrant or senior debt instrument to give the Treasury Department some skin in the game. Quote, such terms and conditions shall be designed to provide for a reasonable participation by the secretary for the benefit of taxpayers in equity appreciation, unquote. So they've got to get some kind of stock in all these companies. Treasury may sell such warrants later on to make money for the primary benefit of taxpayers, but these are non-voting holdings. So that's what attaches to the loans, not the grants in the aviation sector only. The airlines are also given tax relief. As was in the original House and Senate versions, they're going to suspend collections of airport and airway trust fund excise taxes, a tax holiday from the date of enactment of the law through January 1st, 2021. Now, those airport and airway trust fund tax rates, we're going to take a big hit anyway, because 7.5% of ticket fares when no one's flying is nothing. The head charges, the segment fees, when no matter what the level of the fees are, times 0 equals 0. So the balances were already going to dwindle down below the, I believe, between 6 and 7 billion right now is the uncommitted balance of the trust fund. So this tax holiday will get rid of that. And then it'll begin to eat away at the 17 billion or so balance of money held in the Airport and Airway Trust Fund that's already obligated or committed, but hasn't been spent out via outlays yet. In other words, it'll make the Airport Trust Fund work just like the Highway Trust Fund, where that all that's in there is maybe enough money to meet the outlays that you have coming up in the current calendar year, that you're in a negative hole in terms of an uncommitted balance. So we'll see if Congress fixes that at some point down the road, but it's not addressed in this bill. Turning to airports, there's $10 billion in grants to airports, and it's pretty much the same as the Senate bill with one big exception. So out of this 10 billion, they set aside 500 million to increase the federal share of the FY20 Airport Improvement Program capital grants of up to from the standard 80 to 90% up to 100%. There's 7.4 billion in grants that can be used, quote, for any purpose for which airport revenues can lawfully be used, unquote, at 100% federal cost share, and they're apportioning this half by how busy the airport was in employments in 2018, and the other half by airport debt service costs, because some of the bigger airports have sizable debt service coming due this year, and the whole point of a lot of this bailout is to make sure that airports don't default on these interest payments later this year and thus blow up the muni debt market even worse than it's going to be blown up anyway. Then there's another $2 billion in grants, again, for any purpose for which airport revenues can lawfully be used, that goes out at 100% share via the regular AIP formula. In the earlier Senate bill, this $2 billion was not going to go for any purpose. It was going to be specifically for capital airside improvements like the normal AIP program, but this got changed so now that it can be used for operating costs or ground side or anything else, and probably will be. And then there's finally 100 million in grants for general aviation airports, apportioned by, I think, the percentage of total NPIS on the airport plan development cost for the GA airports by category, I think. Only one real restriction, other than the standard AIP stuff, attached to this grant, with the primary and the hub airports. Non-hubs doesn't apply to them, and non-primary doesn't apply to them. But the primaries and hubs have to maintain at least 90% of their employment levels from the date of as of date of enactment of this bill, which will be Friday or Saturday, through December 21st, 35. That should be 31st. I'm sorry, 31st, 2020. I had to type this in a hurry. So that's the only real restriction they've got on the airport side. Then we get to mass transit. $25 billion in grants to mass transit agency, which is the same as in the House bill. And the funds are to be apportioned within 7 days of enactment. So by the end of the month, the transit agency should have the full amount of money in hand. It's at 100% federal cost share, and all the money, the entire 25 billion has the same usage availability, and it is, quote, available for the operating expenses of transit agencies related to the response to a coronavirus public health emergency that began on January 20th, reimbursement for operating costs to maintain service and lost revenue due to the coronavirus public health emergency, including the purchase of personal protective equipment and paying the administrative leave of operations personnel due to reductions in service. So it's the direct costs for cleaning, and it's the indirect costs of just having having nobody taking mass transit right now. So primarily, operating costs primarily is what it's going to be used for. Again, all of the money carries that same availability. It's going to be given out via 4 different formulas. The original Senate bill had 20 billion in transit money. It was going to go out. 16 was going to go out via the urbanized area formula, and 4 out via the rural area formula. The House changed this, and the final bill, I believe, will keep the House version. You can see that it puts out a lot less under the rural formula, and they bring in the 5337 state of good repair formula. That's because about 90% of that 5337 formula is the old fixed guideway modernization formula, aka rail mod from the day. that was put in to benefit New York City, Chicago, and a couple of other big old legacy transit systems. That formula, the SOGR formula in 5337, is very biased towards giving a lot of money to New York City and the other older, places with a lot of rail infrastructure that's very old and costly to maintain. So this basically, Senator Schumer put out a press release saying that because of this, New York City MTA by itself should get about $3.8 billion. We're waiting to see the final version. And whereas the urbanized area formula is more, has a bigger set aside for medium-sized cities that are bus only, et cetera. And then another 1.7 billion would go out on another Senate formula, the fast growth and high density state formula. That's a set of tweaks that normally gets folded into the 5307 and the other formulas. So again, $25 billion. It's less, a lot more tailored towards big city agencies and less towards medium-sized cities and smaller cities than the original Senate distribution was. But no matter which of these four formulas the money goes out via, remember, it doesn't make a difference on how the money can be used. All the money is used on those restrictions that were on the previous slide. It's just that using four different formulas, trying to give some states and cities a bigger advantage and a bigger share than others. These are my estimates. They don't include the oversight takedown, which is going to be capped at 75 million, I believe, and any other set asides from these formulas that might work. We're waiting for the technical guidance from the Federal Transit Administration. Then there's $1.018 billion in grants to Amtrak. 492 for the Northeast Corridor and 526 for the National Network. Both grants are, quote, to prevent, prepare for, and respond to coronavirus, unquote, and there's transferability between those two depending on what Amtrak needs. There's a proviso that says that no state shall have to pay Amtrak more than 80% of its FY19 PREA payments, and that sets aside $239 million of that National Network grant to pay for that and, to make available for use in lieu of any increase in states' payments, so that states don't see an increase in the amount of money they got to pay Amtrak for state-supported routes. And it requires Amtrak to recall all of its furloughed employees when service is restored to the March 1st, 2020 levels. Also, finally, frabjous day, Senate Appropriations Chairman Richard Shelby has finally been able to get his Harbor Maintenance Trust Fund off-budget provision into the final, and again, I'm FINAL, not VINAL, version of a must-pass bill, we hope. Section 14003 of the Appropriation Division says that any discretionary appropriation for the Corps of Engineers from the HMTF, not to exceed the total amount deposited in the prior fiscal year, shall be subtracted from the estimate of discretionary budget authority and outlays for any budget school. Basically, so right now the Harbor Maintenance Trust Fund was bringing in 1.7 billion a year. This would take any future appropriations for Corps of Engineers harbor dredging in that equivalent amount from the prior year off budget. Doesn't count towards any kind of ceilings anymore. It does not appear this will allow the spend down of the $9 billion in built up balances over the last 30 years. That'll have to wait for the legislation that the House passed that Mr. DeFazio introduced. But it does give, in a normal year, would give 1.7 billion in relief to the Appropriations Subcommittee on Energy and Water that has the Corps of Engineers funding, so that the basic amount of that was taken in from shipping interests wouldn't compete with any other appropriations anymore. Although, given what's happened to imports from China this year in containerization, you have to expect that the FY20 receipts are going to take a sharp nosedive here because of coronavirus. This provision takes effect on the earlier of January 1st next year, or enactment of the next Water Resources Development Law, if we can get that done this year. Other transportation stuff in this package, there's 56 million for essential air service subsidies. That's the original Senate number. The House had proposed 100 million. They repurposed 25 million in previous FAA emergency appropriations for coronavirus response. There's a provision that suspends the weight limits on interstates through September 30th for trucks carrying emergency supplies, so long as the President's Stafford Act declaration is in effect. And there's a provision that NHTSA needed to extend some deadlines on the highway traffic safety grants to states for coronavirus issues. In terms of what got dropped, The House bill had 1.1 billion for airline greenhouse gas emissions reduction. I think 1 billion was a cash for clunkers thing to actually buy up particularly low efficiency airplanes from carriers, and 100 million was for research into alternative aviation fuels. That got dropped. The efforts to ensure that all air carriers and contractors pay a $15 minimum wage got dropped. The efforts to ensure labor representation on airline boards got dropped. I didn't have time to put this in the slide, but there's nothing in there directly for state DOTs. I know AASHTO had asked for that. However, there's a $150 billion fund towards the end of the bill for general purpose fiscal relief for states, the District of Columbia, territories, and Indian tribes. Once they take off $8 billion for DC and $8 billion for tribes and $3 billion for DC and territories off the top, the rest of it is going to get a portion to states, 130 whatever, 139. We get a portion to states based on population and should be able to be used. So I pulled that up here for any necessary expenditures incurred during the public health emergency that weren't accounted for in their budget and were incurred during the March 1st to December 30th period. So some of this could conceivably be used to cover costs at state DOTs or transit agencies. If your transit agency is not getting enough, they could use some of this of their share of this I think it's like there's a $1.25 billion state minimum apportionment, I believe. And then beyond that, I believe there's a requirement that 45% of this money of a state's total get passed through down to urban areas, again, based on population, and the state keeps the other 55%. But that money could conceivably be used to plug some gaps by states in state DOT budgets or in cities for transit agency budgets. The regular transit budget was not enough. So with that, that is the end of the presentation, and Rob, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Fantastic, Jeff. Really great information. If folks aren't already receiving Transportation Weekly, you certainly see why you should be. Jeff is certainly a font of all this information and follows it closer than anybody. As I said, there are a bunch of questions, or there's the ability to submit questions through the questions function on the webinar website. We've already got a bunch that have come in. I'm going to try to group these together. We have a few minutes. I'm going to try to do them a little bit by general, then maybe by mode. Go ahead and submit if you haven't already. Just to save you some time, the recording will be made available, and you'll have access to those slides maybe later this afternoon, but certainly by tomorrow morning. So all this will be made available. So let me start here, Jeff. There's a bunch of questions just about the context for all this. Do us a favor and compare this particular package to the late 2000 stimulus. There's a lot of questions about the kind of projects. Is there anything about things being shovel ready? How do you define any of that? Any kind of prioritization about how the money is spent for particular projects?
The purpose of the two bills is very different. I mean, the era in February 2009 was about trying to generate construction jobs, and this is more about trying, and also I should say the era was also about trying to plug the gap in the revenue gap that state and local governments had seen because of the recession by layering tens of billions of dollars in 100% general fund share, 100% federal share general fund dollars for highway and transit construction and airports on top of existing programs. It basically gave states a couple of years where they could reduce their own spending and increase and use this the new one-time federal spending to take advantage of that. This bill is very much about operating expenses, not about capital. I expect that most of the money will get used up entirely by operating expenses by airports and transit agencies on that side, not on new construction projects. And so again, this is not the last word. This is an attempt to stem the bleeding on the demands, that's caused by the lack of demand for transportation right now, and give them a few weeks so that Congress can go home and isolate, because they're still running around the Capitol building right now. And Then this is the third bill. One was 8 billion. The second bill was about 100, a little over 100, I think. This is about 2 trillion. There will be fourth and possibly fifth bills later on starting in late April, early May. So by then we'll have a little clearer picture, hopefully, of what this is doing to the construction side of things, the capital side of things. So right now it's just about operating costs. And the legislation that will deal with trying to get capital spending respent will happen then.
That's great. That is there's a bunch of questions on that. I think that's really important for folks to understand the difference between the demand side problem we have right now and the supply side problem we may have had in 2008. It's maybe a simple way to look at it, but that's pretty clear. Another big picture question, there was a version that was circulated of the bill yesterday that would allow the Treasury Department to purchase outstanding muni debt as a strategy for shoring up the municipal bond market. Any discussion about this ability to reduce the debt exposure of transit agencies? To use that ability to reduce the debt exposure of transit agencies?
Honestly, I only got this bill an hour and a half ago, and I'm still trying to find that. It's all connected. The city and state, the city budgets, transit agency budgets, airport authority budgets, and the interconnectivity of all that debt. It's all connected in one big thing. There's again, there are a lot fewer transit agencies that issue their own debt than there are airport authorities. But I honestly haven't haven't looked at the possibility. Again, there's $500 million for the secretary to do a lot of things, and some of that could be loans, loan guarantees. I think some of that could also be purchases of debt. Although in the earlier version that I saw, it was the secretary could purchase special debt that lasted, a year or less. So it wouldn't be buying existing longer term securities. But the fact that there's a new $150 billion of cash grants going out that wasn't in the earlier version may mean that they've settled on cash grants in the short term instead of buying muni debt as a stopgap for state and local governments.
Got it. There's a bunch of questions in here too, I think, about the existing rules and whether those pertain, things about NEPA and Buy America. This is probably related to your first comment that this is not really about construction jobs in this case, or construction projects, right? This is more about operations. So NEPA, right. Buy America, all that's still in place.
Yeah, these airport grants and these mass transit grants, while transit agencies and airports in theory could use them for capital projects, in likelihood, almost all this money is going to be used for operating costs, just to pay, to pay salaries and pass through the contractors, whatever, to keep people from having to go on the unemployment lines. So to that extent, the NEPA is not going to be an issue. If you're not spending money on a construction project, NEPA is not an issue.
Right.
Many of the, if they do choose to spend these dollars in the conventional way, most of the requirements existing either in Chapter 53 for transit or in just the other parts of Title 49 for airports do continue to apply. I know that the Buy America stuff continues to apply, prevailing wage stuff continues to apply, things like that.
Mm-hmm. So early on, you mentioned $36 billion in discretionary approps for USDOT. Can you talk about more about that and what might be included?
Yeah, that's the $25 billion for the transit grants, the $10 billion for airport grants. Those are both discretionary appropriations from the general fund. And then there's another billion, there's the $1 billion for Amtrak, also out of the general fund. And then there's some odds and ends. There's $5 million for the DOT Inspector General to keep an eye on things. There's some increase in some salary and expense account at OST and FRA and the MARAD to keep track of, paying for extra cleaning supplies and overtime and things like that. But so basically the $36 billion, it's the transit grants and the airport grants and the Amtrak grants are the appropriations. Originally, the House bill had the $40 billion in grants to airlines and other air carriers as an appropriation. And in the final bill, that appears to have been shifted to some other kind of mandatory budget authority that's not through the appropriations process.
Got it. Got a lot of questions on aviation, particularly on the sustainability points to it. You mentioned that part of this was dropped out, at least the what you call the cash for clunkers for aviation was dropped. Was there anything else in there about asking the airlines to invest in more sustainable aviation fuels? Anything else related to climate or sustainability related to aviation, far as you can tell?
Not that I could tell. No, they appear to have dropped all the environmental stuff as one of the ways to get Senate Republican or White House buy-in.
Anything here about positive train control?
I didn't see it. There doesn't appear to be any extension of that deadline. I'm told that elsewhere in the bill, I didn't look in the Homeland section, but they have extended the real ID deadline for airports because no one's going to be, people can't go to the DMV, can't get real ID licenses, and states aren't, and any state legislatures that haven't passed the law yet or may not meet now. So I know that the real ID got extended, but I do not believe the PTC deadline has been extended.
Got it. Got a bunch of stuff in here about Amtrak as well, about how that money is allocated. Where did it go? Is there any breakdown on how that money is sent to Amtrak on specific routes, anything for the Northeast Corridor? Is there any more specificity on the Amtrak money?
The appropriations are $492 million for Northeast Corridor and $526 for National Network, but it then says this may be transferred and merged. Each account has language that says it may be merged with the other account. So yeah, there's nothing real specific in there. That Amtrak is allowed to use its own judgment, I believe, in trying to figure out how to allocate that money. Except that there is a minimum $239 million set aside that has to go to states to make up any increase in their state supported route payments, so that the states don't have an extra financial burden during this tax drop off. But other than and there are some restrictions in the back of the bill, I think, about Amtrak, like, because they got some weird labor stuff going on as always. But no, there's no, as far as I can tell, there's nothing in the bill that allocates by routes or micromanages Amtrak's ability to use that money to plug holes which it finds necessary.
Got it. And related, folks are wondering about anything on freight rail or trucking. Is there anything freight related that you could point to specifically in here?
Except for the waiver of truck weight regulations through the end of the fiscal year during the Stafford Act emergency for trucks carrying, respirators and ventilators and masks and gloves and whatnot. Aside from that, there wasn't anything in this round on the trucking sector. I think FMCSA got to repurpose like 150 grand of contract authority to pay for some of their overtime, but nothing else in there at this time. Again, that'll be for the rounds 4 and 5.
And I'm trying to lump all these together. There's a lot of questions from folks, I think, who are looking for guidance on kind of how the process for transit agencies in particular, on things that it might be, ways that they might go ahead and apply for this money. I know you're just going through all this stuff now, but is there any kind of guidance for required documents, anything to support the funding or the operating costs and operating revenue? How do you, what about if the transit agencies have had to cut service, if they're supposed to be providing appropriate levels of service, how do you document that? Any advice for folks on how they should think about those specifics about how the money's allocated?
There doesn't appear to be much. The money's going to be out. The Secretary is required to apportion the money no later than 7 days after the bill is signed into law. So we're talking a week from Friday or Saturday. That money will go out through the existing electronic system and be on hand. But right now there's no specific documentation requirement written into the bill to prove coronavirus related losses. The FTA may come up with some guidance on that later on, but as of right now, it's just reimbursement for operating costs to maintain service and lost revenue, and it seems pretty broad. There's also a requirement that none of this has to, there's a provision in there that says none of it has to be involved in a TIP, STIP, long-range plan or anything like that. And, but unless otherwise specified, applicable requirements under Chapter 53 shall apply to funding made available under this act, except that it's 100% federal cost share. And that it's general fund money in addition to any trust fund money. So as of right now, it appears very much carte blanche on how trades and agencies wish to spend it within that one paragraph of general restriction on use. I'm talking about how that it's your direct costs of protective equipment and cleaning plus anything that you feel that has been lost because of the downturn in demand for service.
Got it. Yeah, there's a lot of questions in here about that. So I guess the short answer is that we're still early in the process. It actually hasn't been finalized yet. So a lot of that is still to come in terms of the rules and regs for how all this gets sent out. Let's just end with a couple of things about where we are now. So, so literally, where are we exactly right now? And do you see anything changing, being added or dropped during the reconciliation process?
Once the Senate passes this thing, hopefully by 5 p.m. today, they hope, they're leaving town and it's done. And the House will either have to take it or leave it. That's the general approach. And the speaker, I believe, is that right now House Democrats are having a series of conference calls with committee chairmen to ranking file members to explain various parts of the bill, like 6 different ones. DeFazio is having the one on the infrastructure provisions at 5 p.m. I think. So that they can the Democrats can get all their members comfortable with it and then try to get it voted on. But like I said, it's nothing's official until something's signed into law or at least passed by one chamber, which then leaves town. But it certainly appears that as far as the transportation parts of this bill go, the deal's pretty much done.
Yep. Anything on non-emergency medical transportation in this bill?
Not that I've seen, no. Again, there's an entire several hundred page division of the bill. It's all about healthcare that I didn't even look at. So to the extent that you're talking, ambulance or air ambulance, I don't know. That's if it's addressed in the healthcare title of the bill, I didn't bother looking.
Understood. We are a few minutes over time, so I want to go ahead and stop now. We've received a ton of questions that we just couldn't get to. As Jeff was saying, he's really just absorbing a lot of this right now. It's really remarkable we were able to get this much information, from Jeff just in this short period of time. As we said, this recording will be made available on our website. You should continue to follow Eno's website and Eno's Transportation Weekly for all of the latest. As this all evolves, we will be all on top of this. Jeff is certainly going to be all on top of this. So make sure you check out our website at www.enotrans.org. And as I mentioned, Eno Transportation Weekly is really going to be the greatest source for all of the latest as this continues to evolve. So again, many thanks to Jeff for all the work that he did and for participating today. Many thanks to you all for taking the time to join us. Please all stay safe and healthy. Have a great afternoon.